You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hey everyone. When we started this history podcast back in 2012, it was for several reasons. But first and foremost, it was because we thought the story of the Civil War and Reconstruction is an important one that deserves to be told. And at the time, back in 2012, there weren't really any other podcasts that were narrative histories of the Civil War era and Reconstruction years.
And so we set out to tell that story. And we've always intended to cover both the Civil War and Reconstruction because to us, it's all really one story.
And we wanted to tell that story because, well, it's fascinating and dramatic, and the stakes involved were unbelievably high with both the war and with Reconstruction. But we've always believed it's an important story to tell, not just for its entertainment value, although it does have that in spades. I mean, everyone loves a good story, and this is a great story. But the story of the Civil War and Reconstruction is also an important one because it's illuminating and educational.
Our goal with the podcast from the very beginning has been twofold. One, we hoped that people would enjoy listening to us, and two, we hoped that listeners would learn something from it.
And not just learn something about the Civil War era and Reconstruction years, but also come to have a better understanding of the nation, the society that we live in today as Americans. Well, you've heard the old saying that those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Well, there's a lot of truth in that claim, especially when you look at how a nation, a people, a society works together for the common good, and how they try to find solutions to the problems and the challenges they face as they work toward that goal.
And as history podcasters who are telling the story of the Civil War and Reconstruction, it hasn't escaped our notice, and we hope it hasn't escaped yours, but it hasn't escaped our notice that many of the issues and challenges and concerns that Americans grappled with in our nation's past, well, they're the same issues and challenges and concerns that we as Americans are grappling with today and that fill today's headlines.
Whether it's the power of the federal government, people's constitutional rights, or immigration, or economic injustice, or racial inequality, or election integrity, or America's role on the world stage, or the separation of church and state, or how we consume information and where that information comes from, or the role of technology in our everyday lives, or how we interact with the environment, or, well, pick any issue, and there's really nothing new under the sun. In some form or fashion, the issues and challenges and concerns that we're grappling with today and that fill today's headlines, well, they're the same ones we've grappled with in the past.
And so, history at its best is a story that doesn't just entertain us. No, it'll also educate us and inform us. Knowing the true story of our past allows us to approach today's problems and today's opportunities with more confidence, able to avoid the missteps that worsened problems in the past and that held us back as a nation from taking advantage of opportunities to advance the common good.
One thing we've noticed from looking at people's stories from back in the days of the Civil War and Reconstruction is that people, many people, a lot of people, realized they were living in historic times, that history was being made right in the midst of their everyday lives as Americans. They realized that the days they were living through were an inflection point in the history of our nation. They were aware that the actions being taken and the decisions being made by ordinary people and by the government were important and would play a vital role in shaping the future of the United States of America.
We just wanted to felt compelled to share some thoughts today about history and the story we're telling on the podcast, because we believe strongly that it's not just a story about America's past, but that it informs and educates us about the days we find ourselves living through right now.
And it's a story that reminds us that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people contains within it a potential boundless opportunity to advance the common good, to ensure that everyone can live their lives in peace and safety as they seek better futures, not just for themselves, but also for their children. It's a story that reminds us the actions being taken and the decisions being made by ordinary people and by the government are important and play a vital role in shaping the kind of country we find ourselves living in today and what kind of nation the United States will be in the future. Well, we know we have listeners all over the world, so we're kind of sorry this has been a very American-centric message. But hey, we are Americans. And if you're listening to a podcast about the American Civil War and the Reconstruction years after the war, well, then you know how we are. We're Americans. And there's no denying that as Americans, we're living through historic times when the actions that are being taken and decisions being made by ordinary Americans and by the government are incredibly important. And so we just wanted to remind our fellow Americans that there are lessons to be learned from our nation's past as far as the decisions each one of us is making today. In this message, we haven't talked about one political party or the other, or about right or wrong, or about facts and fabrications. Not because we think those things aren't important, but because we think they are important, and that your decisions about those things will be better informed if you understand what happened in our nation's past, and you appreciate how history informs and educates us about the days we find ourselves living through right now.
We believe strongly that knowing the true story of our past allows us to approach today's problems and today's opportunities with more confidence, able to avoid the missteps that worsened problems in the past and that held us back as a nation from taking advantage of opportunities to advance the common good.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. You know, we're just history podcasters, but we do hope that in some small way, the story we're telling helps each of us be a better, more informed person, and in that way helps us together build a better America.